Welcome to the Prosperity Podcast with your host, Brian Davey, focusing on economic empowerment in Northern Ontario. Join us for dynamic guests sharing ideas, stories, and news that fuel Indigenous business growth. Discover success stories and cutting-edge strategies to unlock the potential of Indigenous entrepreneurship. This is the Prosperity Podcast because when we grow together, we all prosper. Let's get started. Today we're going to be talking with Carole Long, who is the business advisor at the Northwestern Ontario Innovation Centre here in Thunder Bay. And she's going to be talking to us about a very interesting topic on copyright. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you for having me here today.
I wonder if you can begin by just giving us a bit of an overview of your background, and we'll get into some questions from there.
Yeah, for sure. So I've lived in Northwestern Ontario my entire life. I moved away for school here and there. And then I was a business owner. I was an entrepreneur for 20 years, 2 different businesses. And I did little things all in between, like most entrepreneurs. We're always trying new things. And then I came across the position at the Innovation Center, and I thought that would be really fit into what my passions are, the ecosystem of Northwestern Ontario and supporting entrepreneurs in the North.
Good. So copywriting is very interesting to me, and I get asked this, and I don't ever have answers to it. So I'm glad you're here to provide some answers. So as let's say you're an artist. I'm an artist. I did my work. I put a lot of time and effort into it, and by doing the art itself, is it automatically copyrighted? Maybe first of all, describe what copyright means in the context of law, if you can.
Law, yeah, for sure. So copyright is the legal rights to protect your original work from being distributed or copied or replicated in any way without your permission. It does automatically apply. As soon as you create that art, it is your art. And so it has to be an original expression of art, and it has to be something that is on a fixed medium, meaning it has to be outside of your head and either printed on paper, maybe on a canvas, or even in files, photography, however, but it just needs to be outside of your head and written on something concrete.
So is this just art? Could apply to, is this music as well?
Music as well, for sure. It could even be plays. So it's photography, art, any type of art, whether it's canvas, oil painting, watercolor, and murals as well, plays, dramatic, storytelling, books, even manuals. When you create a manual, maybe for even your organization, you might have manuals and step-by-step for your clients. That would be something that you guys own as an organization as part of your copyright, meaning so someone can't just take that manual and copy it and use it for their own organization.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So really anything that's written in expression, that's an original thought or expression of an idea, is considered art.
Right. So let's say I did a painting, and is there something that I do on the painting at the back of it or in the front of it, or do I write my name on it, a date, or is there something that I do to symbolize that it is my art and copyrighted and the original owner of that art?
For sure. As soon as you have created the art, you want to identify that, just to let everyone know that this is your art. So it is the symbol C with a circle over it. Right. You can write it on the back of your prints because most people don't want to put that on the very front of there. You can have like a business card maybe that sits in the frame that you're selling, but you would have to put that C with the comma, your name, comma, and the year that you created that art. So if you were to do it today, it would be my name's Carole, so I would go C with a circle, comma, Carole Long, comma, 2024. And then that's just a way to show that it is copywritten.
Okay. So let's say you're commissioned by the city of Thunder Bay, and they want you to put your art up on their walls or something like that. And so is there your symbol on the art, is it sufficient in itself to protect it, or particularly if you're expecting some kind of payment for that art that's been commissioned by the city? So how does that work? Do you enter into a contract first and then get an idea of what they want to see in your art, or is it entirely up to you on on what you want to put in your art to hang on that wall, or how does that work? What's the steps for engaging a buyer of your art?
This is a great topic because sometimes I think it gets confusing with when you're hired for your art. So typically when you're hired, you're the artist. You can lay out any sort of contract agreements that you want. Either, I look at, say, if a mural, if I was hired by the city of Thunder Bay and on a building, I painted this beautiful mural, and then 5 years they end up locating that work into a different building. But I don't maybe agree with the new people that are taking over that building. So I would have it in the contract that it has to be painted over, taken down, or whatever. It's all up to you when you're being hired for your art. You can even put in, this is only being allowed for on the wall. You cannot make t-shirts out of it. You cannot put it on mugs, or you can only use it for a year. Whatever you feel comfortable with that feels like you're still being authentic to yourself, I would put in that contract. But say if you were working for the city of Thunder Bay and they asked you, they're like, okay, we just need a flyer, and you do this flyer and you use some of your artistic abilities, that would be your company's property because you're an employee and you're doing your work. So it's usually owned by the company that you work for. It's not your art in that way. But if I was working for the city and they approached me because they knew I was an artist, I would know that I would say, okay, well, let's make an agreement outside of my work agreement. So just making sure that anytime that you're allowing someone to benefit from your art, you want to have a contract in there that you both feel comfortable in, what outlines what is to be used, how long it's to be used for. Even for promotion, you might say, I don't want this on the city's website, or whatever you want. It's your art. You can do whatever you want with. But, there is business to it, so just being a little bit flexible, but making sure, and it is up to you as the artist to make sure that they are compliant with that. Just because you have that C and you've written a contract doesn't mean that everyone abides by these contracts, and so it's up to you to make sure that they're following through with what they agreed with.
Great, awesome information. I never knew that. That's great. So if I'm at a booth at a large conference and I have my art there at a display booth, and people are coming there and taking pictures of my art, is there any downside to that? Is there a legal risk? Should I stop people from taking pictures, or it's okay to take pictures, or maybe that's a question sometimes that comes up, and I don't know the answer to that.
That's interesting. It is an interesting question. I think it's a preference for the artist and what they feel comfortable. Most people, they want to share their artistic abilities and what they're doing. It's creating like a knowledge between people. You could put like, please, don't take photography of my art, or whatever. You really can do whatever you want that makes you feel comfortable in that. It would be odd, and again, people are people, so I wouldn't put anything past anyone, but it would be strange for someone to take a picture of your booth and then zoom in and steal that and whatever. But you can also put out there like, all of my images, all of my creations are copyright protected, and possibly that can make people think, oh, that's right. Because sometimes people are taking pictures, they're not really understanding the value behind what they're taking, and they don't really realize the cultural representation that some of these images might have, and maybe they're sharing them in a way the artist doesn't feel comfortable with. And I'll give you an example, is that there's these those paint by number type of kits, or paint kits and stuff like that. So sometimes there's Indigenous artists that can contribute their images. They get paid for that, but then it gets sold to a third party, like a customer that maybe it's someone that loves to paint, but they just don't have the skill. Now they paint all these paint by numbers and they put them on their Facebook page to sell. So they think they're the artist because they filled in the colors, but really it's not. So that's just a really interesting way to think how, when it trickles down the line, the end user that's painting the paint by numbers might not understand that them selling their art is actually them taking someone's art.
Oh, okay.
So it's just to be really clear. I hope to think most people aren't bad characters and they mean well and they just don't know. So I would be very outspoken with my art and how, like, this is my art, it's copywritten, this is how I want it to be used. But yeah, like when you sell that piece of art to someone, I don't think you're coming into my house and telling me where I have to hang it. So it's not that specific, but it's just knowing that I cannot use it for commercial. That's usually what people say in their contracts, is that this image can't be used for commercial resell or exploited in any ways, and that usually ends it all when you use that commercial wording in your contracts.
So when it comes to creating prints,
Yes.
Can a buyer, I guess it depends on the contract that you engage in, I suppose, that the buyer can create, let's say, up to 100 prints.
Yes.
And they could come back and if it does well, they can go back and revisit the contract and ask for another 100 prints.
Yeah.
But they will never own the original.
Right, never.
And the artist, the original artist, has the ability to control the number of prints that are out there, correct?
Yes.
So does the artist ever have control over the pricing of those prints?
Not necessarily,
No?
but they can control it by asking for a certain royalty. So say, I hire you and you're printing, you said max 100 prints, and I say, okay, and I'm like, oh my goodness, Brian, it sold out so quickly overnight, we got rid of 100. Then you're like, okay, well, allow you to print 100 more, but I want a little bit more money. And so I might then increase my price to the customer or whatnot. But you can also say, I want to benefit this community, and therefore I want my art sold here, and I don't want it to be over $25. That's the max you can charge. You can do that as well. There's even food brands that do that. So grocery stores might carry local food brands, and they all have to agree that the max price that they can sell at that grocery store is a certain amount, because if customers saw it different priced all over town, you start to feel, it's cheaper here, or they're ripping me off, or something like that. So as an artist, you can lay out, your price range if you want to, but that might be something specifically for an individual in a certain circumstance, but that's probably pretty rare. But food brands do that, so I could see it. If it's something commercially going to be sold, I could see an agreement like that with the price and making sure that you get what you feel is the value of it.
So is there another level of security, like you were talking about the symbol C and the year and your name on the art?
Yes.
Can you go above that for added security somewhere? And how would you do that if you wanted to do that?
Well, what it's called is you register your copyright. So instead of a C, you'll see an R in that circle. So that means that art piece has actually been registered. For artists, it's pretty impractical to think that you register every single piece of art, because most artists create a lot of pieces throughout the year. To register it, you would just go on, you can Google Copyright Canada, the Canadian Intellectual Property Office. You can just do it online. It's $65. It's not a lot of money. And it creates a legal document, like a reference to the exact date and who you are and everything that's specific about that that art piece that you've worked or you've created. So in that terms, it just allows you, if someone's infringing on your art, if you didn't have it registered, it might take you a little bit longer to prove that you are the rightful owner of that. If you did, you could just show up and say, here's the artwork, here it is. Conversation's done, like you've proved it. So it might just be a little bit harder. And when we say harder, it takes longer, which then the person that's not acting in the best way could maybe then be still making money off of your art while you're trying to fight that proving that you are the registered owner or you are the owner of that art. So having that registered protects you a little bit more, and I suggest that for artists that are doing something in a commercial way or they have a contract with a larger company.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I can talk about music a little bit.
Yes.
And let's say that I wrote a song.
Yes.
And I picked up my guitar and I started playing to my Facebook friends.
Okay.
So do I put a C down here somewhere or put it behind me, or how does that work? So I can protect the lyrics and the music to the lyrics.
That's great because it seems it would feel funny, like you laughed, right? Like every time you're like, you sign up a C, you're like, you know, like what do you do? Typically, if people, wherever you are posting that, so say if you have a YouTube channel, it'd be right in that link, like right in your bio, that everything on this page is copyright and owner is you. You'll see that on a lot of artists, platforms like Etsy and whatnot, where a lot of artists are selling their wares, or even, you know, I think YouTube too, you'll see it in a lot of the comments or the info. It's in there. It's in a lot of terms and conditions on people's websites or Shopify sites, e-commerce sites. It will be in that information. So you don't have to broadcast it on every 20 minutes. You know, you can just keep on jamming with your friends. You don't have to interrupt it every 5 minutes and hold that up. Just as long as it's somewhere on your platform where you're producing that music or recording that music or showing. And I'm sure maybe with your podcast here, even that'd be something to look into and say, like, all the information here is copywritten, meaning that someone couldn't just take this episode today and then rebrand it as their own and using it as educational material on their own website. We would be famous, but
Good. Yeah,
but we
good.
wouldn't want that. We wouldn't want
very
that.
good. So let's just talk about recording music. Let's say you're in your bedroom and you're recording several songs that you've written, and once you're done the recording, is that automatically protected given that you just recorded it?
Yeah.
And so what do we do with the recording? Do we just keep it in a safe place, or do we have to send it off to some kind of office to say, I recorded this, now I need it protected or copyrighted? Or how does that work?
It's the same as art. The second that you've completed it and put it on something concrete, like a recording, it's yours. You own it.
Okay.
And you brought up a really, really great point, especially with music. Usually you do a little bit, you work on it, and then it becomes like the end product at the end. But you want to save all those drafts. You want to save all of that work that you did, because it does prove that you've gone through some sort of skill or some sort of process in order to create that end product. So say if someone was like, Brian stole that music from you, you could say, well, here's 3 months of me working through, and this is how I came to this. So because music is strange, because you can change a few beats of it and it could be something different, but you might have been influenced by something. It's pretty hard not to be influenced by music. So I feel like it's something that artists in the music industry all understand. There's a line that you can cross that will feel like you are stealing from someone else. And it's almost, I always feel like if you feel as a consumer confused as who this artist is, then usually they're murking that line. They're going a little bit over to stealing someone else's music or ideas or whatnot. Same with like comedians do the same thing. When you're telling a joke and you write a joke, that's your joke. But a lot of times people use the concept, but they might change a little bit of the words. But most people that are in that artistic field, they'll notice that you're hitting the same things, or you're mimicking the same way someone's been telling that joke, or the same way someone's been strumming that guitar. So it feels a little bit more inauthentic, and it doesn't feel genuine that it's actually that person's original art. So anyways, when you're creating the music, you want to try to be not so influential. Like, you don't want to listen to a bunch of music and then go to your guitar, because sometimes that's just, we end up copying people without realizing it.
Yeah.
So sometimes music artists will spend time alone and then create their own music. Maybe that's just a process that I've learned, just to be safe that you're not copying anyone else. So that's a little tricky industry. The artistic, like music, is a little bit tricky because you just have to change a few notes and it sounds a little bit different, but you can kind of tell when people are doing it in an unauthentic way, when they're actually purposely using someone else's material.
Right.
Yeah.
So if I were to use some of these, I noticed there was a site or an app or artificial intelligence app that creates music for me. So I write into the instructions of what kind of song I wanted to write, and it spits it out, and it's, some of it is very good. And so, is that protected automatically because I created it using this AI product?
This is a very interesting topic, and it's something that's being debated right now. I don't know what the final outcome will be, but typically the way we see it is not your art, because it would be the same thing as me giving you all the ingredients to a tomato sauce, and and I say you make that, and you producing it, and me pretending that that's my recipe, that's my sauce, but all I had was the ingredients. So it is it's almost like you are collaborating with someone, but it's not a person. It's technology. When you're punching into AI and saying, I want the beat to be happy, I want it to use the word tree 10 times or whatever, it's not taking a lot of skill. You're not usually using your artistic skill to come up with it. You're just inputting things and having AI output that finished result. So it is a little gray area, and I think there will be in the coming years really more defined, because otherwise we could just all write books. We could all be artists right now if I'm just like, tell me a story about this, and then I pump it out and AI writes a 200-page book for me, but I didn't write one word. I just had the idea. There took no skill from me. AI had all the skills. So it is a little tricky, but that's the way I try to make it a little bit more clear is, did it take me skills? Was my artistic skills used in this way? But yeah.
Well, that's interesting. And when people do storytelling, is that, I'm always confused as to whether or not that's copyrighted or not. When people are relating a legend or relating a myth or if someone comes along and uses that elsewhere, like you just said, this story or myth or legend, and it's used in some other context by some other person, is that copyrightable?
Yeah, this one I find is another tricky one, just because of the history of storytelling in Indigenous cultures. Like, I don't think we actually, as a country, gave the rights so it's not like I look at it like nursery rhymes. The stories can be told over and over again, but the author owned that at one point. Now that copyright is only good for the lifetime of that artist that created it. So whoever first created that story probably is past now, but 70 years after they die. And then after that time has lapsed, we can all use it free, and we're allowed to use it in any way that we want, because the copyright is now gone and done with. So I don't know if that applies because it's been so much time has passed, but if you were to take a story using some of that teachings and create a book for children or whoever, that is your book. You own it. That's your copyright. That's your story. It's your entitlement. And I think of it in the way of we can all go through something like COVID, okay? That happened to all of us, but my story is different from your story, but I'm allowed to talk about COVID. You don't own the rights to COVID. So it's almost like that too. It's like if you're talking from your own perspective or your own ideas or your own imagination, and you're using your own skills to write it out, then it's yours. But yeah.
Okay, the last couple of minutes I have here, I just wanted to focus on something that's really evolving really fast.
Okay.
That's NFTs.
Yes. Interesting.
I'd like to know a little bit about that and whether or not that's automatically copyrighted if you get into NFTs, create them on your own computer, or maybe you can just explain. Well, first of all, if you just give a little definition of your understanding of NFTs and how we can, then we'll talk to the copyright section a bit.
Okay. I'm definitely very, very, very on the tip of the iceberg with this information. Right. I find it very interesting because I find NFTs are a way of artists to monetize their art in a digital space, where a lot of it is like graphic designs or whatnot. And then as far as my understanding is, NFTs have like on the back end what's called the blockchain. So it's something that every time that piece of art is used or transferred in sales, it's actually recorded and documented, so that there is hopefully no way someone can just copy that or make prints of that and sell that, because that NFT will be attached to the actual chain of when it was, who created it, where it was first sold, who bought it, who has it, and it's all a part of that inscripted protection of rights. So I do find it really interesting. I'm really curious to see where that goes. They're using it for things like mortgage, because mortgage fraud was happening. So it's a good way to document the progression of a sale of an art, because you might not be here after your art is gone. So it's good to see where people can now look at. They don't have to go through your accordion file and look where all your sale records are. They can just see it on a blockchain. So I'm interested, and I don't know much of. I think for sure it happens right away, but I don't know if there's any fees to, like, because who's paying for that blockchain to be updated? Who's making sure? I don't know, because it's such a developing idea. So I'm really interested in it for sure. Yeah, because I've seen some artists in their community do really well with NFTs.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Carole, for joining us today and presenting your knowledge on this topic. So if someone wanted to get in touch with you and learn more about what you do, where's a good place they can, is there a website they can go to?
Yes, there's a website. So we're NWO for Northwestern Ontario, and then innovationcentre.ca. And my name is Carole, Carole, at nwoinnovation.ca. And I am very passionate. I want everyone to be able to monetize their own work and live and make money in the places that they love to be. So I'm here to support in any way possible, or at least direct you to someone that might know more than I do. But as far as registering for a copyright's pretty easy, but I can support anyone going through that process if they're just unsure. They just want me to watch them sometimes fill out the forms, right? So I'll do anything.
Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
That concludes another episode of the Prosperity Podcast with your host, Brian Davey, focusing on economic empowerment in Northern Ontario. Subscribe, rate, and comment to support Indigenous entrepreneurship. Remember, when we grow together, we all prosper. Stay inspired, stay innovative, and let's keep prospering together.
This video serves as general information. While we strive to offer accurate and current information, we do not provide any express or implied warranties regarding the completeness, accuracy, reliability, or suitability of the information presented in this video for your specific circumstances. Any reliance you place on this information is entirely at your own risk. We strongly recommend consulting a qualified professional before making decisions based on the content provided in this video to ensure it aligns with your unique situation.